price of reality. Simon Winter sat in the cosy glow of his living room, the fire crackling softly in the hearth. The air was warm, filled with the scent of Mara's favourite tea, and the rhythmic ticking of an antique clock added a soothing cadence to the quiet evening. Mara sat across from him on the plush sofa, a book resting lightly in her lap. She looked at peace, her auburn hair catching the flickering firelight, her soft smile radiating a joy that Winter had fought across lifetimes to see again. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. She caught him staring and raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Winter smiled faintly. "Just thinking about how lucky I am." Mara chuckled, closing her book and setting it aside. "Lucky? Coming from the man who bends reality to his will, that's saying something." "It's true," Winter said, his voice quiet, almost reverent. "I've seen things that would drive most people mad. I've fought things that shouldn't exist, walked in realms no one should walk in, and yet none of it mattered. Not the Crimson Dawn, not the Shadow Realm, not even the balance of reality itself, because the only thing that truly mattered was you." Mara's expression softened, and she reached for his hand. He turned his gaze to the fire, his thoughts clouded by memories. "You don't remember everything, and I'm glad for that. But the things I did to rewrite reality, to cure you, it came at a cost. I sacrificed everything. Time, power, even parts of myself. I broke every rule, defied forces older than time itself. There were moments I wasn't sure I'd succeed, moments I thought I'd lose you forever." He turned back to her, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. "But there was no power in existence, no cosmic law, no God that could stop me from saving you. Even if it meant tearing apart the fabric of reality, I would do it all over again." Mara squeezed his hand, her smile tinged with sadness. "You've always carried the weight of the world, Simon, but you don't have to anymore. I'm here. I'm healthy. You saved me." He nodded, the corners of his lips twitching upward. "I know, and every day I look at you, I'm reminded it was worth it. You're my anchor, Mara. You're the only thing that keeps me grounded." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling softly. Simon reached over and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "You're so beautiful," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Mara leaned forward, cupping his face with her hands. "You're not so bad yourself, Simon Winter." She kissed him, a slow, lingering kiss that felt like a promise of love, of peace, of a life finally free of chaos. For a moment, Winter allowed himself to believe that this was his forever. A sharp, shrill sound shattered the tranquility, cutting through the room like a knife. Winter's head snapped toward the source of the noise, his body tense and alert. The antique clock on the mantelpiece seemed to shudder, its hands spinning wildly out of control. The soft glow of the room dimmed, and for a fleeting moment, the fire flickered blue. Mara's hand tightened around his. "Simon, what is that?" Winter's jaw clenched as he stood, his instinct screaming that something was wrong, very wrong. The alert came again, an ominous tone that resonated deep within him. He reached for the small, metallic device sitting on the coffee table, its screen flashing red, with a single, chilling message. Reality, distortion, detected. He exhaled slowly, his calm demeanour masking the storm brewing inside him. Turning to Mara, he forced a reassuring smile. "Looks like it's starting again." She looked at him with a mix of fear and understanding. "Be careful." Winter leaned down, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Always." His voice dropped to a murmur, meant for himself as much as for her. "Here we go again." As he moved towards the door, The room seemed to grow darker, the weight of what lay ahead settling on his shoulders. Simon Winter had fought nightmares before, torn through realms of madness and despair. But as he stepped into the unknown once more, one thought stayed with him. Whatever was out there, it wouldn't take her away again. Not this time. In the heart of a shadowy, decrepit fortress that seemed to exist outside of time, Dr. Thorne sat in a room lit only by the cold, flickering glow of monitors. The screens cast eerie shadows across the jagged stone walls, their faint hum the only sound breaking the suffocating silence. Thorne's gaunt face was hidden beneath the hood of his dark cloak, his crimson eyes glowing faintly as he stared intently at the chaos he had unleashed. "Surely you've sensed it by now, Winter," he said aloud, his voice a mix of mockery and venom. "You're too attuned to the fabric of reality to ignore the ripples. And yet, you haven't come. Why?" He stood, his imposing figure casting a long shadow that danced across the walls like a restless spectre. His hands clasped behind his back, he turned to one of the larger monitors, his lips curling into a cruel smile as he watched the carnage unfold. "I've made it so easy for you," Thorne continued, his voice dripping with malice. "Chaos, death, despair, all the things you can't resist fighting against. I've even given you an invitation tailor-made for your so-called heroics." He leaned closer to the screen, where a grainy video feed displayed a dark alleyway, bathed in the flickering light of a nearby street lamp. A woman screamed, her voice piercing the night, as a shadowed figure emerged from the fog. Jack the Ripper, his cloak spattered with fresh blood, stalked toward her with a predatory grin. His knife glinted in the dim light, dripping crimson. The woman's screams cut off abruptly as he lunged, the monitor going dark for a moment before shifting to another feed. On this screen, the chaos was even more brutal. A witch hunter, clad in 17th century garb, roamed the streets of a modern city. His tall hat and long leather coat marked him as a relic from a time of fanaticism and fear. He held a torch in one hand and a heavy iron cross in the other. Flames roared behind him as he accused a man on his knees of witchcraft. "You're in league with the devil?" the hunter roared, his voice carrying through the chaos. Without hesitation, he brought the torch down, setting the man ablaze. The man's screams echoed as the witch hunter turned his cold, merciless eyes towards the onlookers. "Who else conspires with darkness? Step forward and be judged." Dr. Thorne chuckled softly. "Ah, the irony. The hunter has become the hunted, and these fools don't even realize it." The next screen showed a city block in ruins. Cars were overturned, windows shattered, and fire licked at the edges of the buildings. A demon, towering and muscular, with reddish glowing skin and horns spiraling upward, rampaged through the streets. Its claws raked through stone and metal as if they were paper. People fled in terror, their screams rising as the demon grabbed one of them and hurled them against a wall with a sickened crunch. "Beautiful," Thorne mused. "The chaos of the physical form, the ultimate expression of terror." On another screen, the undead roamed. Streets once bustling with life were now deathly silent, save for the grotesque groans of the zombies. They moved in packs, shuffling with purpose, their decayed faces twisted in eternal hunger. A man fought desperately on the screen, swinging a crowbar at the oncoming horde. He managed to knock a few down. The undead swarmed him, dragging him to the ground, his screams quickly drowned out by the grotesque feast. Thorne's smile widened as he turned away from the monitors. "Come on, Winter," he said, almost playfully. "How much longer will you sit in your quiet little world, pretending you can ignore this? You know I've done this for you. Jack the Ripper in modern times. A witch hunter judging the innocent. A demon rampaging through your fragile reality. And of course, the undead. So simple, yet so effective." He gestured toward an ornate portal behind him, its edges glowing with a deep crimson light. "And this," he murmured, "this is my piece de resistance. A place not even you can escape from. A prison, a nightmare, a hell tailored just for you. But you have to come to me, Winter. You have to stop me." Thorne's voice grew darker, his mocking tone replaced by a deep, guttural growl. "You think yourself a saviour, a hero. You think you've mastered reality, but you're wrong. You're still bound by your weaknesses, your love, your hope, your foolish need to fix what cannot be fixed." He stepped closer to the portal, his eyes blazing with unholy fire. "When you come, and you will come, I'll show you just how powerless you truly are." The room seemed to vibrate with his laughter, a sound that resonated through the stone walls like the tolling of a bell. Thorne turned back to the monitors, his smile fading as his eyes narrowed. "Come, Winter," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the portal. "The stage is set. The players are in place. Let the game begin." The night was heavy with the stench of decay, the faint groans of the undead filling the air like an unholy chorus. The city lay in ruins, desolate and lifeless, save for the shuffling masses of the walking dead. From the shadows, a figure emerged, his presence unnoticed by the mindless horde. Simon Winter stepped forward, his piercing blue eyes scanning the area, his dark coat blending seamlessly with the surrounding darkness. The faint hum of his advanced glove whispered against the stillness. Winter's voice broke the silence, calm and clinical. "I've dealt with your kind many times before," he said, his tone devoid of fear. "The reanimated dead, a fascinating phenomenon, though entirely unnatural." He crouched behind the remnants of a car, watching the horde shuffle aimlessly. "Your ability to function, rudimentary at best. The only reason you can move, groan, and seek out living flesh is the faint electromagnetic activity still pulsing in your decayed brains. A grotesque imitation of life." One of the undead seemed to sense his presence, its sunken eyes locking onto him. It groaned louder, drawing the attention of others. They began to shuffle in his direction, their numbers growing rapidly. Winter straightened, unconcerned. "If I were to disrupt that electromagnetic activity, you'd cease to function entirely." He adjusted a setting on the advanced glove he wore, its surface lighting up with intricate patterns. He pressed a button, and a low-frequency pulse radiated outward. The effect was immediate. The undead began to convulse, collapsing one by one like puppets with their strings cut. The once roaring horde fell silent. Winter watched with detached satisfaction. There. No more shambling, groaning, or feeding. Next. He stepped into the shadows, his body dissolving into the darkness like smoke. This was a skill he had learned from the elders, an art of shadow manipulation that allowed him to traverse unseen and unimpeded. The darkness swallowed him whole as he glided to his next destination, the demon's rampage. The demon stood in the middle of a blazing street, its horns casting long, jagged shadows against the fiery backdrop. Its glowing red skin pulsed with raw energy as it roared, tearing apart cars and throwing debris with reckless abandon. The ground quaked beneath its feet, the air thick with the acrid stench of sulphur. From the shadows, Winter stepped forward, his boots crunching softly against the scorched pavement. "Hello," he said, his voice cool and unflinching. The demon turned, its burning eyes narrowing as it growled. "He said you would come." "Did he?" Winter replied, tilting his head. "I've dealt with your kind before. Your power may seem formidable, but it's just a manifestation of a different reality of physics. Manageable. Shame the Alpha isn't here. I've already bested one of your kin." The demon lunged at him, claws outstretched, but Winter calmly raised his gloved hand, twisting a dial. A high-pitched whine resonated through the air as another pulse emanated from his glove. The demon stopped mid-stride, its body trembling violently. "What have you done to me?" the demon roared, its voice losing its once terrifying edge. Winter took a step closer, his expression unreadable. "I've taken away your strength, your connection to your reality. Now you're nothing more than a big red weakling." He paused, adjusting his glove again. "Don't worry. Your power will return once you're back where you belong." The demon collapsed to its knees, groaning in frustration as its body began to fade, dragged back to its own dimension by the disruption. Winter watched impassively. "Goodbye." He stepped into the shadows again, his form dissolving as he glided to the next threat. Dr. Thorne observes. Dr. Thorne leaned back in his chair, watching the monitors intently, his lips curled into a sinister grin. "Formidable, Winter. You do not disappoint." On one of the screens, his witch hunter screamed as he was dragged back to his own time, the twisted tether severed by Winter's interference. A signal flashed, confirming the return of another minion to their reality. Thorne chuckled darkly. "You've cleared the board nicely, but the game's not over. Now time to catch the uncatchable." Winter stood on a deserted street, the air unnaturally still. He adjusted the settings on his glove, scanning for signs of his final target. "Interesting," he muttered. "He should be here. No wonder they couldn't catch you, Jack." A faint shimmer caught his eye, a distortion in the fabric of reality. Winter's eyes narrowed as he adjusted his scanner. "Ah, there you are. Clever. 2 places at once. Very crafty." He merged into the shadows, reappearing in another location, where a massive, swirling portal awaited. Standing before it, knife in hand, was Jack the Ripper. His blood-stained cloak swayed in the unnatural breeze emanating from the portal, and his face was twisted into a maniacal grin. "Catch me, if you can!" the Ripper screamed, his voice echoing as he leapt into the portal. Winter checked his readings, his face a mask of frustration. "The portal leads to modern times. Oh, Jack, why couldn't you have just gone back?" With no hesitation, Winter stepped into the portal. The swirling energy closed behind him with a deafening roar, leaving the street empty. From the shadows, Dr. Thorne emerged, his eyes glowing with triumph. He stood where the portal had been, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "So easy," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Goodbye, Winter." Winter stepped through the portal, his boots hitting the polished tiles of a hospital hallway. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered faintly, casting a sterile glow on the pristine walls. The faint hum of machinery buzzed in the distance, and the scent of antiseptic filled the air. He straightened, scanning his surroundings. Everything appeared normal. Too normal. He adjusted his glove, scanning for Jack the Ripper's signature. "Oh, where are you now?" he muttered under his breath, his voice laced with irritation. Without hesitation, Winter dissolved into the shadows, re-emerging in a dimly lit room. The air was cold, the faint scent of blood lingering in the corner. His eyes immediately locked onto the Ripper, who stood in the centre of the room. But this wasn't just any confrontation. The Ripper had Mara, the knife in his hand pressed against her throat, his blood-streaked grin twisting into something far more sinister. "Welcome, Winter. Took you long enough." Winter's expression darkened. His voice was calm, but cold as ice. "You should not have done that." The Ripper laughed, his grip tightening on Mara. "What's the matter, Winter? Afraid to lose her again?" Winter raised his glove, the intricate patterns glowing faintly. "You won't get the chance." The pulse was instantaneous. The Ripper's body convulsed, his knife clattering to the floor as he screamed in agony. He crumpled to his knees before fading out of existence, the remnants of his presence dissolving like smoke. Winter stepped forward, catching Mara before she fell. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice soft, his hands steady as he scanned her face for any signs of harm. But as she opened her mouth to reply, her body went limp. "Mara!" Winter yelled, his heart pounding, as he lowered her gently to the ground. His glove hummed as he initiated a scan, the device flashing warnings. "No, this can't be right," he muttered, his voice trembling. The door burst open, a doctor and several nurses rushing in. "What happened?" the doctor demanded. "She collapsed," Winter said, stepping aside as they carefully lifted her onto a gurney. "I need to see her results immediately." They wheeled her into a nearby room, hooking her up to monitors as Winter followed closely, his mind racing. Minutes passed like hours as he watched the doctors run tests, their faces grim. Finally, one turned to him, holding a clipboard. "She's showing severe neural disruption," the doctor said. "Her brain waves are erratic, similar to someone experiencing advanced Alzheimer's. Did she have a history of this?" Winter's heart sank. He didn't need to be reminded of the past. "She was cured," he said firmly. "This shouldn't be happening." "It's possible the disruption from whatever affected her caused a regression," the doctor replied cautiously. "We're doing everything we can to stabilize her." Winter clenched his fists, his gloved hand twitching. "I need more than possibilities. I need solutions." Consumed by guilt, hours passed in a blur. Winter sat at a desk in the corner of the room, his gloves discarded, his face pale and lined with worry. He stared at a computer screen, his fingers flying across the keys as he pored over data, research papers, and his own findings from years past. He muttered to himself, his mind racing as he rechecked every calculation, every hypothesis. It shouldn't have spread. The neural disruption was localized to the Ripper. How did it affect her? Behind him, the doctors worked tirelessly, but Winter barely noticed them. His focus was singular. Mara's condition was worsening, and the guilt was consuming him. He had sworn to protect her, to never let this happen again, yet here he was, watching her regress into the very state he had fought so hard to erase. He rubbed his temples, exhaustion clawing at the edges of his mind. "Do not worry, Mara," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I will find a cure, even if it takes my entire life." Winter buried himself in his work, his mind a whirlwind of calculations and desperate theories. The world around him faded as his guilt and love for Mara drove him to obsession. The once confident master of reality was now a man haunted by failure, consumed by a promise he could not break. Thorne's triumph. Far away, in the darkness of his fortress, Dr. Thorne watched the scene unfold on a flickering monitor. His laughter echoed through the cold chamber, a sound filled with triumph and malice. "Your weakness binds you, Winter," Thorne said, his eyes glowing with satisfaction. "Love, guilt, obsession, they're the chains that hold even the most powerful in place." He leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "You're so consumed by your precious Mara, so focused on finding a cure, you didn't even bother to see if the world you were in was real." Thorne's laughter grew louder, filling the room with a sinister resonance. "This false reality will keep you trapped for eternity. While you chase shadows, I will unravel everything you've ever worked for." He leaned forward, his smile widening. "Goodbye, Winter. Rest in your guilt. Rest in your delusion." The monitor flickered off, leaving Thorne in total darkness, his laughter echoing like a haunting melody through the void. In Winter's hidden base, the hum of advanced machinery filled the air, accompanied by the rhythmic blinking of monitors. Most of the time, This room was the nerve centre of Winter's operations, a place where he could detect reality disturbances, calculate anomalies, and plan his interventions. But now it was empty. The monitors flashed urgently, displaying warnings of a reality disturbance. Critical, but no one was there to see them. The flashing lights intensified, casting an ominous glow across the room. Then a shadow passed over the screens. A massive figure stepped into the control centre, its presence almost overwhelming in the confined space. The Alpha, a towering, wolf-like creature with piercing, intelligent eyes and a coat of dark fur streaked with silver, had entered. The Alpha tilted its head, sniffing the air. Its sharp senses picked up something strange, a void where there should have been Winter's distinct aura. The beast growled low, its golden eyes narrowing. Something was wrong. The monitors continued to flash, the urgent alarms echoing through the room. The Alpha turned its attention to the screens, its clawed hand brushing over the console as it read the warnings. It didn't fully understand the intricacies of Winter's technology, but the absence of Winter's signature was clear. A soft, rumbling growl escaped its throat. The Alpha moved swiftly through the base, its massive frame gliding through the halls with surprising agility. It reached the residential quarters, where Mara was sitting in a comfortable chair, sipping tea. She looked up and smiled warmly at the sight of the creature. "Alpha?" she greeted, setting her cup down. "What brings you here?" The Alpha stepped closer, its golden eyes meeting hers. For a moment, it simply stared, its gaze filled with an intensity that made her pause. Mara tilted her head, her smile faltering slightly. "He's on a new mission, isn't he? Off chasing some reality disturbance? You know him. He'll be back soon." The Alpha remained silent, its gaze unyielding. Slowly, Mara's expression changed. She leaned forward, searching its eyes. "Something's wrong, isn't it?" The beast gave a single deliberate nod, the low rumble of a growl vibrating in its throat. Mara's heart sank. She stood quickly, her movements sharp with worry. "What is it? What's happened?" The Alpha turned and began moving toward the control centre. Mara, her mind raced with possibilities, her chest tightening with fear. The control room was still flashing with warnings when they arrived. Mara's eyes widened as she took in the scene, her pulse quickening. "Why wasn't anyone monitoring this?" she muttered, moving quickly to the console. The Alpha loomed behind her, its presence steadying but tense. Mara's fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing the location logs for Winter. The screens flickered as the system processed the query. Finally, a synthetic voice filled the room. "Subject: Simon Winter, location, undetected." Mara froze, her breath catching. "Undetected? That's impossible. He always leaves a trace." She turned to the Alpha, her voice trembling. "Do you think he'll be okay?" The Alpha stared at her for a long moment, its eyes filled with an intelligence and understanding that went beyond words. Then it threw its head back and howled, a deep, mournful sound that reverberated through the room, echoing Winter's absence. The howl sent shivers down Mara's spine, and she whispered, almost to herself, "What have you gotten yourself into this time, Simon?" Allies in shadows. Dr. Thorne stood atop a jagged peak in his dark fortress, his cloak billowing in the unnatural winds that swirled around him. His glowing eyes pierced the blackened sky as he raised his hands triumphantly. "I have done what you, Father, and no other could do," Thorne declared, his voice booming with unbridled arrogance. "I have stopped Winter. The balance is shattered. The game undone. I am the most powerful being of all." A cruel smile stretched across his face as he lowered his hands, the air crackling with energy. "Now it is time to eliminate the remnants of my past. Eldur, Seranna, My old friends, it's time for you to meet oblivion. Now nothing can stop me. Deep within the shadowy recesses of Seranna's fortress, the dark hold, the air was thick with unease. Seranna sat regally on her throne, her crimson eyes glowing faintly as she conversed with Eldur, whose towering, decayed form loomed nearby. They spoke in low tones, discussing strategies and alliances, their voices carrying the weight of ancient knowledge and shared history. But then Seranna stopped mid-sentence, her sharp senses pricking. Her hand instinctively tightened on the armrest of her throne. "Do you feel that?" she hissed, her voice tense. Eldur nodded, his sunken eyes narrowing. "We are under attack." The atmosphere in the dark hold shifted, as if the very walls themselves sensed the impending danger. Seranna rose gracefully from her throne, her movements precise and deadly. "Prepare for battle," she commanded, her voice carrying a chilling authority. "Something big is coming." The air grew heavier as the tension mounted. Eldur's skeletal frame shimmered faintly with dark energy as he summoned his strength. Seranna's lithe form tensed, her fangs bared, ready for whatever horror awaited. Suddenly, the massive double doors of the dark hold groaned open, the sound reverberating through the chamber. A towering figure stepped into the dim light, its golden eyes gleaming like twin suns. The Alpha had arrived. Seranna hissed instinctively, her claws extending. "So, the beast has come to challenge us," she growled, circling warily. Eldur placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "Wait." He studied the Alpha, his decaying features creasing into something that might have been a smile. "Welcome, Alpha. This is a first for us, so please excuse our hospitality." The Alpha stood silent, its imposing presence filling the room with unspoken power. From behind the massive wolf-like creature, two smaller figures emerged, scrappy, wiry beings with sharp eyes and quick movements. Known as the Gnat and the Flea, they were infamous for their cunning and speed. Seranna's crimson eyes narrowed. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" she asked coolly, her posture still tense. The Alpha growled low, its golden gaze shifting. The growl deepened as footsteps echoed from the shadows, and a figure stepped forward. Eldridge, his tall, elegant frame bathed in the faint glow of the room. He inclined his head respectfully. "Hello, Eldur," Eldridge said, his tone formal. He turned to Seranna and bowed slightly. "Seranna." Seranna raised an eyebrow. "Eldridge. Always a surprise. What brings you to my hold?" Eldridge's face darkened. "Winter is missing." The room fell silent. Even the air seemed to still as the weight of his words settled over them. Seranna's voice was sharp. "Missing? How?" Eldridge nodded grimly. "I suspect the hand of Thorne. He's been moving pieces for some time now. Winter's absence is no coincidence." Seranna's lips curled into a snarl. "Thorne, it seems he has struck first." Eldur spoke, his voice a low rumble. "We are not powerful enough to face Thorne directly." "No," Seranna admitted, her voice heavy with frustration. "Not alone." Eldur turned to the Alpha, his gaze steady. "But together, we can be." The Alpha growled in agreement, its golden eyes glinting with determination. Seranna paced, her mind racing. "He will come for us first. Thorne will want to eliminate us before we can act." Eldridge nodded. "Yes, but together, and with the Alpha, we stand a chance. Still, there is one thing we lack. Winter." Eldur inclined his head. "Then we must find him." Seranna frowned. "Thorne's fortress is impenetrable. We cannot storm it." Eldridge's lips curled into a faint smile. "No, but we don't need to storm it. We need someone or someone small, fast and undetectable to infiltrate his stronghold and find Winter. Eldur's sunken eyes shifted to the gnat and the flea. I know just the pair. The two scrappy figures stepped forward, their sharp, eager faces lighting up at the challenge. Consider it done, the gnat said, his voice quick and jittery. Yeah, the flea added, grinning. We'll find your man. Seranna nodded slowly. Good, let us prepare. We don't have much time. The alpha growled once more, its deep, resonant voice filling the chamber as the group began to move with purpose. The battle against Thorne was about to begin, and though the odds were against them, they would fight for Winter, for the balance, for survival. Simon Winter sat in the sterile glow of the room, his chrome mask discarded on the desk beside him, his gloves tossed carelessly onto the floor, his fingers rested against his temples, his mind racing faster than the computer humming before him. Data streamed across the screen, endless streams of numbers, chemical compositions, and neural patterns, each one another step toward the answer he so desperately sought. Mara. Her name echoed through his mind, like a plea and a condemnation all at once. He had worked so hard to cure her, to rewrite the fabric of reality itself, to bring her back from the brink. And now, somehow, she was slipping away again, not because of fate or disease, but because of him. How could I have let this happen? He muttered, his voice hollow, barely audible above the hum of the machines. The disruption, the neural waves. It doesn't add up. His eyes flicked to the monitors lining the walls of his lab. Each one displayed models of Mara's deteriorating brain, alongside complex equations and calculations designed to halt or reverse the damage. None of them worked. The graphs only dipped lower, the simulations all failing. This shouldn't have happened, Winter said, his tone sharpening. He pushed away from the desk, pacing the room as his mind continued to churn. The disruption was localized to the Ripper. The frequencies were calibrated. There's no reason it should have spread to her neural activity. But the truth, no matter how much he denied it, stared back at him from every screen. The device source on his glove, his ultimate tool for controlling the uncontrollable, had somehow caused her condition to regress. His tool, his failure. He sank into the chair once more, his hands running through his dishevelled hair. I must fix it, he whispered, his voice trembling with desperation. Unbeknownst to Winter, the very realm he was trapped in fed on this desperation. The alternate reality, carefully constructed by Thorne, was a prison, not of walls, but of the mind. It preyed on Winter's greatest strength, his intelligence, and twisted it into his greatest weakness. The lab around him was a perfect replication of his own design, down to the smallest detail. The equipment hummed and glowed with a lifelike precision, giving him all the tools he needed to solve his impossible task. The simulations ran seamlessly, the data fed back in perfect loops, but none of it was real. Every equation, every calculation was part of the illusion, an endless cycle of impossibilities designed to keep him trapped. Time passed differently here. Hours stretched into days, days into weeks, all without Winter realizing it. His mind, sharper and faster than any machine, worked tirelessly, driven by guilt and determination. He believed he was making progress, that the next calculation, the next breakthrough, would save Mara. But it was all a lie. The illusion ensured that every answer led to more questions, every solution unravelled into more problems. The harder he worked, the deeper he sank into the loop, and the longer he stayed, the more the realm adapted, feeding him new variables, new equations to keep him occupied. Winter's hands hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. His eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, were bloodshot and sunken, reflecting the exhaustion that even his enhanced physiology couldn't entirely overcome. He glanced at a hollow image of Mara displayed on the desk, a smiling portrait of her, taken during a rare moment of peace. "I promised you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I promised I'd never let this happen again." His head fell into his hands, but only for a moment. The guilt wouldn't let him stop. He forced himself to sit up, staring at the equations again. "I'll fix it," he repeated, as if the words alone could bend reality to his will, "even if it takes my entire life." He adjusted the input on console, feeding in yet another iteration of his calculations. The computer processed it, flashing the same result as always. Error. Simulation failed. Winter's jaw clenched, his mind already racing to correct the failure. He didn't notice the room around him flickering faintly, the edges of the illusion quivering before restabilizing. He didn't notice the way the same numbers repeated themselves on different screens, or the subtle inconsistencies in the equipment's behavior. This was the trap's brilliance. Winter's mind, capable of unraveling the most complex mysteries, was turned against him. The trap gave him purpose, kept him focused, and ensured he would never question the reality he was in. Every error, every failure, only drove him deeper into the cycle of guilt and determination. Outside the lab, the realm itself stretched infinitely, a void of darkness and shifting shapes. It was a place that reflected Winter's psyche, calm and orderly on the surface, but beneath, a chaotic web of impossibilities. The illusion was powered by his own thoughts, his own fears, making it nearly unbreakable. Dr. Thorne's voice echoed faintly through the void, though Winter couldn't hear it. "You'll stay there forever, Winter," Thorne said, his tone dripping with satisfaction. "Consumed by your guilt, trapped by your obsession. You'll never see the truth, you'll never escape." Thorne laughed, the sound reverberating through the endless darkness. Back in the lab, Winter leaned closer to the screen, his mind working faster than ever, caught in the perfect loop. To be continued.